Record. Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to the fourth webinar in our Citizen Science and Water Challenges series. This one is all about the value of river research and citizen science to businesses. This one's proved very popular. We've had more people sign up to this one than any of our previous webinars, although obviously we're doing lots of promotion and people are talking about the webinars, so hopefully people are coming back for more. I'm not going to waste any more time because we have got a lot to get through. So very quickly for the introductions, just to introduce who's here. This is the wider team that's put this webinar series together, although we have some guest speakers today. So Leslie Parsons isn't joining us today, but she's in the top corner. Then you've got myself, Ant Parsons. I'm a director of ALP Synergy Limited, and we work with universities, researchers, businesses, public sector, always with a sustainability theme, quite often with a water theme. And we're really passionate about rivers. John, over to you.
Hi there, I'm John Bryden from Thames 21. I oversee our Improving Rivers programme, so everything from river restoration, water quality, flood management, and quite a lot of citizen science and collaborative community engagement as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Cook and I'm from the University of Warwick. I'm an environmental scientist that mainly focuses on water quality, and I'm looking to integrate citizen science more into my research.
Hi, I'm Natalie Gilbert from Thames 21, the Evidence Programmes Manager, working with John and with communities and data and evidence in all shapes and formats, from sensors to photographs and people.
Hi, I'm Paula Nixon and I'm a business innovation consultant focusing on environment, working with ALP Synergy.
Fantastic, thank you. And you'll see we have Sarab Gupta and some of his colleagues there from Earth 5R. So they're one of our partners in India that we're working with. I don't think we have them on the call today. So, but we do have two guest speakers, and I've very rudely not put their photos in. So if our guest speakers, Indu, if you'd like to introduce yourself now, you'll pop up on everyone's screen and they'll get to see you.
Hello everyone, and this is Indu Murthy. I work as a principal research scientist at Center for Science, Technology and Policy currently. But my experience on citizen science comes from my work with Indian Institute of Science, which is a premier research institute in Bangalore, India. So which is what I'm going to be sharing with you all over the next few minutes. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Manishs?
Hello everyone. I'm Manishs from Jeevit Nadi Living River Foundation, India. I'm one of the founder member and currently director of this organization. I mainly focus on to the scientific projects conducted by Jeevit Nadi, and especially the interface between the scientific research and scientific work, I would say, and the business community. Thanks. I'm truly excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Anyone who's been on these webinars previously will be aware of this, but we are recording the webinar so that we can share it on YouTube and on websites, and other people can pick up on the series, and it will be there forever. We'd love everyone to contribute through the chat. You're all muted, but we'd love you to contribute through the chat or through the Q&A, and we're monitoring those so that we can interact. And Paula is going to give you a question that we want you to be thinking about as well. If the view of all of us is annoying you, then you'll see that you can, if you click on the pictures, there's a choice of little buttons. If you pick on the full bar, not the smallest one, the one in the middle, if you pick on the full bar, then you'll only see the speaker. And then finally, if you do use the chat, you'll see the picture down in the bottom corner. If you could select, when you go into the chat, select all panelists and attendees, then everyone can see your question, your comment. And we will download the chat afterwards, and we can share it if people wish. So And then finally, from the introductions, as I said, this is the 4th webinar in a series of 6. We've covered the first 3. If you've missed any of them, the videos are all live and we've shared links, and we will share the links again. Webinar 4 next week is going to be on using and developing free tools and apps. And webinar 5 next week, and webinar 6 the week after is our idea building workshop. Now we're hoping that everybody's getting passionate about that. What we're trying to do is share lots of insights. My apologies there, that's my dog that's just leaving the house. So yeah, webinar 6 is the idea building workshop, and what we want to do, share lots of content, and by the time we get to that, we should be talking about how we can collaborate, how we can take forward citizen science together. So without really rude disturbance, I will move on to Paula.
Hi, everybody. Anne, could you go back one slide, please? Okay, brilliant. So just an overview of the structure of this webinar. So we've been talking about citizen science and research in business, and the emphasis on this one is of the value to business. But we'll be looking at that from different perspectives. So myself and Indu will be looking at this from a business perspective. John will be taking an integrated view, looking from various angles. Sarah will be speaking as a researcher, and Manishs will be talking about citizens, science, and the relationship with entrepreneurship. We'll each be trying to describe the benefits and the barriers as we see them and have understood them. And we'd like you to think throughout the presentations about the barriers that you foresee to working with businesses, because at the end of this, we'd like you to put your thoughts on barriers in the Q&A, and we'll copy that transcript and send it to you. Next slide, please, Ant. So I'm looking at businesses' motivation for being involved in research and citizen science, and I've selected a few examples of how that exists as motivation and how it manifests. So businesses commonly want to work with researchers and with citizen scientists because it gives them a competitive edge and it supports or improves their reputation. And of course, within that, the competitive edge comes from getting meaningful information that informs the business. But they can also be seen to be improving or protecting things rather than doing damage. And they can do that several ways. Examples of involving their staff, so that staff believe and experience in the good that the business is doing. They can do it by involving customers, perhaps in crowdsourcing or in developing open innovation solutions, and by empowering citizens. It's very explicit when they provide funding and very obvious that they're supporting good things. So that's an option that they often choose. And sometimes they also contribute with specialist skills that their business owns, or specific materials, or even infrastructure such as building drinking water wells. And the example there from the UK's Guardian newspaper is of IBM and SAP opening up big data platforms. So investing in data platforms that citizens can use to contribute to science will be good for their reputation. Legislation can also be a driver and motivator. So in the UK, we have 2 pieces of legislation that force businesses to consider how they involve communities and deliver value in everything they do. When businesses are motivated to contribute to research and involve citizen scientists, it's often shaped by the nature of their business. So it's quite predictable to expect health sector, for example, to want to support health research, and that may extend into the environment, where they see that the environment has a relationship with health. Industrial water users often want to protect the water that they use and will use research and citizen science to do it, but they also want to be seen to protect the water environment. And the Alliance for Water Stewardship is an accreditation scheme that will help them demonstrate that, and it's quite popular, we understand, in India. Local employers also want to improve. If they employ a lot of people from the locality, that they're improving that locality for them. So there are some of businesses' motivations for being involved in supporting research and using citizen science. I'm going to hand over now to Indu with her perspective.
Thank you, Paula. Thanks for setting the stage. So what I will be sharing is the key takeaways of a 3-year research program that we did on citizen science. Now, next one. Yeah, so this basically happened in the Western Ghats, and the 2 small insets that you see basically shows you on the left is that this particular program was part of a larger program which happened across 5 different continents. And the interesting thing about this program was that it was a collaboration between a research group, which was ours, an NGO, that was Earthwatch Institute UK, and they had an Indian counterpart here, of course. And of course, the third was the HSBC, that's the bank. Now, the HSBC actually funded this entire program, which ran over 3 years. And we also had their employees, mid and senior level employees, actually coming in and working with us in our research projects. Next. So now, what were the things that we got them to do? I mean, how did we actually kind of module this program so we could get them involved in our research? Was, of course, it begins with a certain classroom session, because you need to orient them. If it's for the public or a student or even for the corporate, primarily if you're trying to involve them in research, we need to bring them up to a certain level of understanding. So which is why we had these classroom sessions on field methods. Now, our program was, our research goal was forestry ecological research. So given that, they had to be familiarized with field ecological methods. So we had some classroom sessions on the basics of how do you go about it, and then setting the perspective by talking about the science of climate change and where the forests figure in this entire gamut of discussion around climate change. And of course, following those, we also had sessions on the larger impacts of climate change, not just on the forest, but also on the social aspects, the businesses, and all the other related things. And of course, the economics. Being bankers, that was something that they were very keen on understanding. How does it affect the economics, or rather the businesses at the end of the day? Now, the interesting thing was that they spent about 2 weeks of their time with us, and at the end of the 2-week period, each of the participants, there were groups of 10 to 12 who would join us, and they were supposed to come up with their own project ideas. What a green project idea, which stemmed from their understanding of what we did over the 2 weeks. It needn't necessarily be around forests. It could be anything that was a green idea. And ideally, they were actually expected to go back and even implement them in their own workspaces, or whatever they were conceiving during the 2-week period. Next. So apart from, I'm sorry, Ant, could you please go back for a moment? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so apart from the sessions, what you see in these pictures on the right is basically actually their involvement in field research. Now, it means, forestry research means, getting your hands dirty, going around the forest, measuring some trees, collecting soil samples, and a whole lot of litter and other things, which is what is very essential in trying to understand the ecology and the carbon in the forest ecosystem. So that's their contribution to research per se. Next. So when we try to look at, okay, what is it that they contributed? How did they help us in the research? When you look at a 3-year program, the contribution came in the way of time contributed by 500 employees, which were from mainly from HSBC. But, subsequently, thanks to this program, we also had other companies, other corporates like the Tatas, the JSW, Ernst & Young, Shell, who came up to us and said, why don't you do some pilots for us? We would like to understand what's happening and how this is done. So in total, we had about 500 employees contributing about 7 to 10 days of volunteering time with us, which means if you kind of compute the total number of hours that they put in, it was about 18,000 hours of data collection, field ecological data collection that happened over a 3-year period. And of course, it came with funding, which was the beauty of this particular project. Now, that's to the contribution. So when we look at the benefits of it as a researcher, as an ecologist, the first thing was, it kind of helped us put together a first major citizen science, or popularly called an experiential learning projects, also in India, which was based around the forest ecosystems. So that was a wonderful opportunity that we got. We helped, or rather we were moving science from within the ivory towers into a space where you could actually kind of talk to people. Because, you know, many a time research is kind of closed door, and sometimes rarely feeds into policy making, but much of it remains as research papers. It's good for academia, but when we look at the applicability, there is some limitation. So we kind of helped to tide over this. This program helped us tide over that. And of course, resource constraint. Typically, you know, a typical research project, we would be working with, you know, a 5-member team with limited funding. But then this kind of helped us get so much more manpower, woman power, or rather human power for actually putting together work, collecting data. And the kind of resource that we got, when I'm talking about the time contribution, was 100 times more than what we could have done as a 5-member team. Next. So, I mean, yeah, so naturally Paula did talk about, you know, what do the corporates look for when they kind of get into such programs. Typically, yes, we did see that, you know, what they were trying to look at is they were trying to look at their role, you know, screen their role as individuals or as organizations in the entire space of sustainability and climate change. So that's something they were trying to kind of forge and try and understand. As a company, of course, this program, as put in by one of the senior officials, they said they were able to renew their focus on sustainable development. It kind of helped their employees also kind of streamline their thinking into the process. And of course, creating awareness in the employees, which obviously went beyond the company operations, because each individual took their learning beyond their office spaces as well, into their homes, into their neighborhood. So which is what was a larger gain as the banks saw. And of course, as Paula rightly pointed out, you know, they would want to be seen as people contributing to the environment or for the social structures. So green thinking was built, which translated into green businesses, or rather, it was a vision that the bank had, and they were trying to get that there. And of course, they get labeled as a green organization because they're doing a lot in that particular space. And of course, I would definitely want to mention some of the project ideas that emerged out of these, which were to do with reduced energy use within the office spaces, transportation demands. So people came up with innovative ideas to address these different things and implemented them as well. So that way, you know, when you look at reduced energy use, the organization definitely gains because there's a reduction in the energy use and the money that's spent on it as well, apart from actually contributing to the environment. So in the whole perspective, if you look at it, there was a lot of give and take, and everybody gained. And of course, on the lighter vein, of course, I would like to kind of say it here that, you know, a lot of these employees who came, at least a handful of them, about 10, 20 of them, as which I'm aware, left the banks and went in to do courses on environment or became, you know, activists themselves. So it's good from an environmental point of view because they took it so much to heart. They were so inspired by this kind of work that they actually started their own organizations and tried to build more of resource. When I say resource, people around such innovative ideas. So that's all I have to share with you all. Thank you.
Thank you there, Indu. Over to you then, John.
Hi there, thank you. So firstly, I'd just like to speak about citizen science and a little project that we've done here. I'll just touch upon the project, which is actually not particularly doing the monitoring work, which citizen science often is, but actually doing the analysis of data. So here what we've done is used a particular water quality model in this case, but we've also then in a later project used a flood risk model to analyse the benefits of delivering a series of wetlands around the catchment to improve water quality within the river. So the actual outcomes of this were that the water quality in the river would reach good status. The flood risk work is still ongoing at the moment, but we actually believe that it would significantly reduce the risk of flooding to properties in the catchment as well. So these constructed wetlands around the catchment can deliver quite significant benefits. And you see in the picture on the left-hand side that we had a small group of community members all around from the local area who got round together to identify the sites, work with the water quality model, and analyse those benefits. If you could move on the slide, Ant. So what this developed into and where it became particularly interesting to businesses is that this group actually became a semi-autonomous group. We provide them with a bit of insurance so they can undertake their works locally, but they've become very much a great voice for what we as an organisation want to try and achieve, which is to improve the river environment. So they took this information very much, with a little bit of support from us, but not that much. And they took it to a local development, which you can see on the top left-hand side, which is looking to deliver over 10,000 homes in the Lee Valley. And they, so this development is actually restoring the river through the development from a concrete channel to a naturalised channel. They're partly doing that to reduce flood risk, but the group took the information to there and said, in actual fact, although the river would be restored, it would actually still be poor quality because of the water. And that has resulted in the developer actually looking to make a contribution of funding to the construction of these wetlands projects throughout the catchment. And that's quite a major gain that we've seen. Is relatively unique in London, that a community group has influenced development, not only in how it's designed, but in also how it invests in the wider catchment. This group have also been, oh, sorry, back one slide. The bottom left-hand corner, you can see the lady in the middle in the black is the ex-Secretary of State for the Environment. Now, they took her, she's actually a local MP as well, and they've taken her out into the area and showed her the evidence and tried to influence government policy. So we actually feel that this is much more effective in terms of us as an environmental charity trying to influence politics, as opposed to in actual fact the local community and constituent members of those MPs actually influencing politics directly. So yeah, if you can move on, please, Ant. So this concept, which we started to develop then, was picked up by a number of universities, including Imperial, Oxford, UCL, and a research organisation called British Geological Survey. And they've gained funding for a major, they call it a Regional Impact for Science in the Environment programme, so this is what they're undertaking at the moment, and it's a 5-year programme with £4 million looking at water management with community groups throughout the whole of London, particularly focusing on these 4 areas. And you'll see in the bottom right hand side there's actually 2 private companies already involved in it, Peabody and Berkeley Homes, which are both big major housing companies who build tens of thousands of homes a year. So they're involved in this and working with it. And on, please, Ant. So where did this lead to in the end? So we didn't just use the information from the community modelling programme to engage developers. We actually looked at working with Coca-Cola, who I also believe fund quite a few projects in India as well. And you can see the statement there from Coca-Cola, and we used the information to successfully gain £83,000 to build the wetland, which you see at the bottom right in the bottom photo. So this is Broomfield Park wetlands, which was identified through that community modelling programme. This program was so successful that we are actually in discussions with Coca-Cola about a major new funding of hopefully significantly more money to build 4 or 5 of these wetlands throughout the catchment. Now, I think the important thing here is to be conscious of particularly what interests the developer or interests Coca-Cola, and that they've got quite a interesting program called Replenish, which probably isn't superb from a scientific point of view, but it's something which is really important that businesses can understand. And I think it's a really important thing that we all need to be conscious of in the scientific community, that businesses want there to be scientific rigor, but they also want it to be simple enough that they can understand it and therefore they can invest in it. So I think that is really important. Now, we're actually seeing quite a big growth in this Replenish, potentially in the food, from a lot of the food and drink industry, and also from the particularly American tech companies. So they seem to be gaining, it seems to be gaining momentum. And this is all part of the water stewardship. So if you haven't looked at water stewardship, I'd definitely recommend doing so. Next slide, Ant. So the final project I would like to just mention here is something which I was hoping to announce or highlight here who the funder was, but I can't actually do that because we're still in the final stages, you know, just getting it signed off, and particularly they want it to be, they want to launch it as an initiative, so I can't particularly reveal the funding. However, what the actual program is, it actually comes out of another UKRI project called Manishs. Manishs developed water resource demand use climate change models for the whole of the UK, and we particularly used one for the Thames Basin, which you can see on this slide. And as part of that initiative, the previous UKRI programme, they developed or worked with us to develop this Water Futures website, which you can click on here. And so this is an interactive, you know, simplified version of the models which they developed through that programme. Now, where we are looking to use this is actually as an educational tool for in schools, which I think is quite an interesting element, because in actual fact, when we're talking about citizen science, we don't just need to think about the analysis, but also the education of people and communities. And that is actually sort of quite a big solution to some of the problems that we face. And in particular, this funder is very keen on using technology to address sort of nature's, the barriers nature faces. So I think there's some quite interesting opportunities around using the citizen science opportunities and the hard science as an educational opportunity to address future risks. So that's me, thank you.
Fantastic, thanks John. I've got loads of questions, but I'm not going to ask them now. I'll let other people ask the questions, and if there's a gap, I'll ask them. So moving on then, Sarah, over to you.
Hi everyone. So I wanted to kind of talk about why researchers might want to connect with businesses when it comes to research and citizen science, and then kind of discuss some of the benefits and also some of the potential barriers to this as well. So starting on a positive note and thinking about the benefits, I think one of the most prominent one is access to resources. So companies and businesses might be able to offer not only equipment, but also personnel as well, and expertise too, in helping you develop your research. Also engagement mechanisms. They have expertise in public platforms and advertising to citizens. So this could potentially capture a really broad amount of interest, but also distribute information as well. They also have a very good understanding of consumers, so the citizens, potentially also kind of an insight into potentially their values and potential problems going on in the community too. And also thinking about funding as well, and the long-term kind of benefits and continuation of citizen science. They might have access to future funding resources that can enable you to continue the citizen science project beyond just your initial project. And then thinking more about some of the potential barriers. I think one of them is that it can be quite intimidating, particularly knowing who to reach out to, what companies to approach, and then knowing not just the companies, but within that company, who to approach to discuss about citizen science research. Vested interests, I think, is potentially another barrier. So if you're working with a company, they might potentially downplay their responsibility in relation to your environmental challenge. This could potentially hinder publishing certain data sets, or maybe even biasing your kind of research direction as well, potentially. And conflicts. So we spoke, or Natalie presented very early on in our citizen science webinar, that it's really important that you're working with people, and therefore you need to make sure that your outcomes align with those people's needs. So by introducing a business, you're now having to work with not only the kind of interests of the business, but also the interests of your citizens. Now, this is fine if you've all got the same priorities, but potentially you might have conflicts, and then that could lead to potential problems as well. That's me.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And then last but not least, over to you, Manish.
Yeah, my presentation is all about sort of a case study, which would bring about all the elements Sarah just discussed. Probably it will have a practical kind of difficulties, whatever we faced, as well as some good experiences. Next one, please. Yeah, when we started working towards river restoration, we went into a mind mapping exercise to understand what are different elements because of which our rivers are tight, and out of which toxic chemicals was one of the area where we saw that not much of the literature is available, as well as this issue doesn't really, is on the forefront. When we talk about dying rivers, it is mainly about industrial pollution, solid waste, encroachments, untreated sewage, etc. But the chemical pollution which takes place from our domestic sector, homes, is hardly talked about. So we divided ourselves into different groups, and for purpose of this presentation, we'll be talking more about how this concept led to some solutions as well as entrepreneurship development. Next one, please. So when we started, when a group of a few of our members started working on this particular aspect, we came across with a retired senior scientist of National Chemical Laboratory who had spent almost all his career into water pollution research. And under his guidance, the group actually started analyzing each and every product which we use right from the morning till night. And this slide is a sort of a gist of that particular findings, what we could understand from this study. So this is like typically normal middle class family member is subjected to or is exposed to more than around 150 chemicals in a day, and in the varying degrees of roughly 20 to 40 grams per day. Now, many of these chemicals are really very hazardous for the human health also, as well as they are hazardous for the river ecosystem also. the group actually went into trying to find out which chemicals are used in popular brands, and from each chemical they went into material safety data sheets, and then these are the tabulated kind of observations. So when we considered this for our own city, the population is 5 million. And if we just average it out by 25 grams per day of this chemical discharge, so it is 125,000 kilograms per day of mixture of all these 150 plus chemicals every day. And definitely no technologies can separate out these kinds of chemicals. It is next to impossible. The more shocking part was as these effluents flow across in the river downstream, a lot of vegetables and fruits farming takes place on the downstream villages. And it is irrigated through the same water which flows down with these many chemicals. And so there are definitely the likely chances that traces of these chemicals which are absorbed by the soil, which are further absorbed through the plants, and these chemicals, so many hazardous chemicals, come back to us in traces through the food chain. They enter the food chain. So we thought a lot about what is the solution about it. The only solution we could think is to restrict the use of the chemicals. But as we know, this is not a practical thing we cannot completely do away with all these products. So we thought of what could be the alternatives, which have got less chemicals or more of a natural chemicals, natural ingredients. And we actually made the list of different alternatives to each particular product, which were based on plant-based kind of ingredients, natural ingredients, as well as there were some ingredients like vinegar and baking soda, which are benign for the environmental usage as well as the personal health. Next slide, please. So what we did as a first step was we created this sort of formula or the recipes of this particular each and every kind of a product which we come across every day. And we published this on our website, as well as we had made some booklets of this as to how to make these products at home. And once these products once this literature was there, just next slide. Next one, please. Yeah. So in such form, the whole formula or how to make this product was shown to the people. It was like it is still as an open source kind of document. We share this freely everywhere. So we also started conducting few workshops. Next one. So these workshops were mainly with two purposes. One purpose was to make the citizens aware about this whole issue, because this issue is linked with individual health as well as the health of our ecosystem. So we thought that we must reach out to as many you can say as many aware or as many sensitive individuals as possible on different platforms, right from very simple society level kitty parties to very serious crowd of universities. We conducted these workshops. These workshops also demonstrated how to make these products on our own at our home by collecting whatever is available in the market. But we got a couple of feedbacks after conducting few workshops. There were a lot of very positive feedbacks, like people said that this has been an eye-opener for many of us, and we want to switch over and make the different choices of the products to go towards this toxin-free lifestyle. But we are not able to have the time available, time required for making these products on our own is not there. So we are willing to pay something for this. So in the meantime, we were also approached with a couple of entrepreneurs who said that they are also very much interested to develop the products based on these kinds of formulations. So next one, please. So we collaborated with a couple of entrepreneurs who developed these products and made this commercially available. And today also they are doing quite a good business. Their business is rising. Next one, please. Yeah, these are different products. Even recently, one person has also created this disinfectant, which is becoming a major issue nowadays with this COVID background. The pollution because of disinfectant is going to be a next big task to handle. So in that, if a disinfectant which is based on natural biodegradable components, that is a welcome sign. Next one, please. So in this whole process, actually, when we reviewed this whole process, we thought that we have now basically a framework where the NGOs or a citizen science group, businesses, and the society overall, they can be actually interconnected meaningfully. Like the NGOs or the citizen science groups can provide scientific inputs to the businesses based on the which are required to solve the real life problems of environment. The businesses in turn can use this particular knowledge to develop products and services which would serve the citizens. And NGOs will also have the interaction with the larger citizens regarding the awareness and education as to why different products and different choices are required. The way to convert unaware citizen into a conscious consumer, I think that is the way to go, and that will revive the businesses as well as revive the ecosystem. Based on these structures, we have some more projects which are already in progress. Next slide, please. So these are different areas on which we are working in collaboration with a few small and big businesses like water hyacinth management, artificial wetlands, which is a great answer to transform the topography or the area which is generally a polluted, stagnant area into a very good community spaces. It can be transformed. Water testing infrastructure. In India, we have a lot of places, flowers and different religious offerings are, that is a tradition. And these offerings finally end up into rivers. So we have been actually trying to, collaborate with the religious places, temples, to create a composting facility along with, by combining this with the local businesses. Then there are some bioremediation based wastewater treatments for, enhancing the performance of existing sewage treatment plants, etc. So these are the areas, but the main concluding thing about this whole exercise was that we could see that the scientific exploration, the scientific understanding can lead to a very vital business input. And based on scientific understanding, if we also create awareness, this whole ecosystem which will be a sort of a positive ecosystem. This can be created. So that's all what I want. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Manish. And what a great way to finish our presentations there, with showing how actually citizen science and research can generate new businesses as well. So, you know, we started out talking about how big businesses like HSBC could come in and the benefits for them. I was really pleased to hear what Indu was saying about how that was creating environmental champions who went back into the workplace, delivering sustainable development for the business, but also helping their bottom line in terms of efficiency, etc. John highlighting about Coca-Cola wanting simple approaches and simple messages that helps them engage their staff, but also their customer base. And then Sarah highlighting around the risk of bias and conflicts with business, you know, dragging your research or dragging your engagement in a certain direction that you may not want it to go. But then Manish, you pulled it all together with, you know, examples of how it can work. And they may be small examples at the moment, but, you know, we should start small and then we should look at how we can scale these examples up. So lots of connections there between businesses. I'm going to hand over to Paula, hopefully, for some discussion around any questions.
We've been following the questions in the chat. And at the beginning, we asked you to tell us what barriers you foresee to businesses engaging. So if you could contribute questions now in the chat about barriers that you foresee, while we briefly talk about Vinayaka KS's question, which is about how people science can help in long-term ecological study. And I would like to ask all of the panelists what their experiences of working with businesses in the long term. Everybody's on mute, so if you wish to speak as a panelist, please contribute now.
Hi Paula, it's John from Thames 21. I think businesses generally are very interested in the new thing, and it's also worth thinking about with businesses, you know, who you might approach. So if you have a business which is using water or using a resource in a particular catchment, then they will be interested potentially in the long-term understanding of that resource and hopefully to reduce the risks to them. And that's where particularly the water stewardship comes in. So, but if you've not got a business which sort of understands its risk to water, then you potentially won't be getting that long-term investment. So where there are businesses such as the food and drinks industries, which see and sort of potentially understand some of their risks to the business, you're likely to get long-term investment, but you may not get that if the businesses don't see that, and maybe that's something we as NGOs or researchers need to help businesses understand. Thank you.
And I get a sense that being creative and thinking about what the next thing the business might be interested in and what your opportunities are to educate them on long-term benefits of engagement can sustain the relationship. I'm almost thinking about a storyboard approach to thinking, what will they need next? What will they be most interested in next? And trying to keep that relationship going. Thanks, John. Has anybody else got anything on that question before I move on to another one that Shailaja's just asked? No. Ant, perhaps you could make it possible for Shailaja to speak while I read out her question or statement. It says barriers mainly from finding the niche for products, licensing under current government policies and competition against fast-moving consumer goods brands, as well as conventional practices. So Shailaja, if Ant can make it possible for you to speak, perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about what it is.
Yes, yeah, the Manish which presented about our products and the entrepreneurs, we are going through a little bit of hardships while getting into the market when there are existing brands available which are actually toxic and which are not really environmental friendly, let's say, but because of the habits and the ease of use or the convenience, people are not looking at it at the sustainable practices as such. And when it comes to the river, it's not there on their agenda. The prime importance is not going to the rivers, but to face with the other issues in day-to-day life. Plus, the government licensing part is the cosmetic thing doesn't come under the FDA licensing. Then there are certain ingredients which should be banned from the government as a rule, which is not happening. And then finding a niche and the mindset, changing the mindset of the people is something which we are finding it difficult. Also the conventional practices, in a sense that for years together, when certain brand has been established, it becomes difficult to change over to something new, some new product and get it convinced, because the mindset is different. And that's what probably for us, when we speak to the entrepreneurs, we find these are the problems and issues. And the capital investment, that also becomes a good, because for any production there needs to be a capital investment, and if there is no support for that, amount of or the batch of one particular product gets into a profit cycle, takes a longer period of time, and that much holding capacity may not be possible for that small entrepreneur. So I think these are the ones which we are experiencing when we are working with the entrepreneurs.
Thank you. And for me, this highlights some of the benefits of working with many citizen scientists over working with a smaller number of paid employees, because the citizen scientists start to very much relate to and understand the problems rather than being unaware or perhaps accepting them in the past, and can begin to see what is possible and become part of driving what is possible. I know that in the UK we have, and it's probably more than just the UK, but we have a 5 a day campaign, which is around encouraging us to eat 5 portions of fruit and vegetables a day over carbohydrates and meats. And it took 8 to 10 years for the general public to become aware of the 5 a day campaign, but it very quickly then went to 8 a day. So it can take such a long time. And the more people that are involved, the more the FMCG brands will start to see there is a business edge in producing more suitable products and stating that they are no longer using products that will be banned. So it's an elegant and sophisticated way, is involving research, combining with citizen science to identify what's important and what can be changed. It was a really useful question for you to put to us, Shailaja, and to help us answer as well. Answer for Paul. Pardon?
Paula, I was just going to say with that, I think undoubtedly the question which Shailaja asked is and highlighted is a massive barrier. And I think, you know, what you've highlighted there is actually a really good way of looking at it. Then these are massive issues that we face, and we need to look outside of our areas of interest for examples of where changes have been made, which we can replicate, say, in the environmental science, or particularly in water, which obviously a lot of us are interested in. I think particularly if we look at air quality at the moment and how air quality has been a major issue, and I think it's a major issue in India as well, and in actual fact how there could be opportunities through the current coronavirus situation of improved air quality and how we can build upon that. If we can use that sort of within sort of some of that understanding within the water industries and water research, then we can, you know, help address that as well. So yeah, it's a really complex issue, but hopefully we can use examples from other areas to overcome it.
And looking at radically different areas for innovation can be very, very powerful. Thanks, John. I'm just aware of time, so I'd like to thank everybody for the questions and ask Ant to use the poll where we're going to ask everybody who's attending a question now.
Okay, thank you, Paula. So I've launched the poll, so everybody can go in and vote. There's only one question. It won't take you very long. And yeah, I should be able to start seeing the answers as they come in. Yeah, fantastic. There's probably one or two questions that were in the chat that didn't get fully answered, but we will, as I said, we'll download the chat and we'll seek to make sure we get the answers and communicate them. As you're all answering this question as well, the other positive news is that we've been asked by a number of participants from previous webinars whether we're able to issue a certificate for these webinars, a certificate of attendance. As we've mentioned previously, these webinars are being funded by NERC, the Natural Environment Research Council in the UK, which is part of UK Research and Innovation. So we will be issuing certificates and we'll issue them retrospectively as well for participants from all the webinars. So if you've been really engaged and attended all of them, then you'll get four certificates so far. And anyone who gets the full set might get a golden certificate for the last one. So yeah, we'll be doing that. So I can see many people have voted. There's still a few people to vote. So the question, which was, after what you've learned through this webinar, are you more or less likely to try to engage businesses with your research or citizen science work? And we have 94% saying more likely and only 6% less likely. So whoever's in that 6%, please do engage with us. We'd like to try to understand what it is we've done to scare you and help you to overcome those barriers. Last few votes coming in. So anyway, thank you very much. I'm going to move the slides on whilst people are still on the poll. Our next webinar is a week today. We realise we may well have confused people by having a 2-week gap, but the next one, we're getting back onto weekly now. The next webinar is a week today, and we're talking about using and developing free tools and apps to help with citizen science. We're getting into the practical bits now. There are lots of different tools and apps that are out there. We also probably may not all have a common understanding of what tools are, so we'll cover that on the webinar next week. A reminder that if you've got any ideas around content or collaboration, please do email Leslie. Her email address is on there. And there's also a feedback survey. So there's a link to the survey there. If you are able to do a screenshot, that would be great. If you're using a phone, you can take an image, take a shot of the QR code and it'll take you straight to the survey. Anyone who isn't able to do that, we will email around a link to the survey later today. And we will also email a link round to the video of the webinar and to the registration for next week's webinar. So there'll be a few emails coming round over the next 24 hours. On that, I think I'd just like to thank our excellent speakers today. Really got to thank Dr. Indu Murthy and Manishs for their presentations. It was fantastic. John, great to have you on board and share some of your insight on Coca-Cola and the other excellent work that's going on in London, and Natalie and Sarah and Paula. So thank you, everyone. Hopefully you're going to have a great rest of however long you've got of your day. For us, it's the start of the day. For you, you're coming towards the end. But thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you all next week.
When I'll just add that hopefully we're going to be using some breakout rooms so the attendees will get to speak to each other and see each other if we manage to sort the technology out.
Fantastic. Brilliant. See you all next week, everyone. Thanks then. Goodbye.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.